AEW Full Gear 2024 is in the books. A very good show at some points with some pretty low points. A controversial show, as a lot of AEW pay-per-views have been this year. What I'm going to be doing in this video is going match by match, giving my breakdown of what happened, my thoughts on the match, as well as a personal star rating for every single match. Then giving a general overview of the pay-per-view at the end. If you guys like this video, please consider leaving a comment, leaving a like, or subscribing because it really does help my video. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into it with our first match. So, first match on the card was a Fatal 4-Way Tag Team match for the AEW Tag Titles. Private Party versus The Acclaimed versus Kings of the Black Throne versus the Outrunners. And it was a very up and down match. The action was mostly good, but the pacing throughout was sort of a nightmare. There was a lot of points in the match where people were out of place and there were timing issues, so they had to pause for a few seconds to find where they are. And even just pausing for a second in a match like this, that's just bam, 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 action, action, action. It takes you out so much, and it seems like an absolute eternity when you're watching it. And there were a lot of those in this match. In terms of the individual team performances, super unimpressed by the Outrunners. They had pretty basic offense, just a lot of punches and kicks and clotheslines. And while you don't need necessarily a very dynamic moveset to be considered a great wrestler, like Tomohiro Ishii, take him, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, and his moveset is very basic. Suplexes, clotheslines, chops. That's the majority of his stuff, but the way he incorporates them into a match is very unique, and he has this very hard-hitting style. That wasn't present with the Outrunners. They were just throwing sort of the most basic work punches you've ever seen, some pretty basic flexing Hulk Hogan power-up spots. Not really a lot to love about them. I'm not a fan of Private Party. I've made that known in several videos, but I will always give credit where credit is due. Private Party was easily the best part of this match, really seemingly the glue that held this match together. And while I don't think this was a great first title defense for him, I was impressed with them in this match more so than I've ever been impressed with them. Because when they're facing the Young Bucks, of course they're going to have a great match. It's facing the Young Bucks. Whereas in this match, they really sort of had to be the ring generals who worked everything together and who were the centerpiece of the entire match. And they did that very, very well. I also really enjoyed the story with the Acclaimed and their teasing of split-ups. The way they incorporated these sort of miscommunication spots into the match was very unique and always felt natural. A lot of times when wrestling will do this, they'll throw in these miscommunication spots where one wrestler is doing one thing that accidentally distracts from their partner getting a pinfall or something like that. It just seems so forced and so like synthetic almost. But in this match, it just felt really natural. It felt really, really good on their part. And the crowd booing Max Caster but being super into Anthony Bowens was very cool to see. And it shows that even though AEW is a little bit of a cold product, these stories that they're telling still can get responses in the crowd if they are invested in wrestlers like they appear to be in Anthony Bowens. So overall, a fun enough match, nothing really inventive or exciting to see in it, really basic throughout, a lot of timing issues, but you will be impressed by Private Party in this match, and the Anthony Bowens Max Caster split up teases add a little bit to the match. So just in terms of the action, it was a 3-star match, but that little bit with the Acclaimed adds an extra quarter star. So 3.25 stars for the opener. Next up was MJF versus Roderick Strong, and these are two of the best workers in AEW, so when you put them out there, you know you're going to have a very, very good match. But if I the wrestling fan were laying out a match between MJF and Roderick Strong, this is exactly what it would have looked like. There was no added dynamic or intrigue or little special flares of character or action to make this match particularly unique. And that's not to say it was bad. It was a very, very good wrestling match. They worked very well together. They had good chemistry, and MJF just sort of relishing in his dickhead heel character, with Roderick Strong being the underdog babyface. I say underdog, not really underdog, even though he took a lot of the offense in the match, but being able to come back with those backbreaker sequences, it was the dynamic you would have expected. I don't really have a lot to say on this match. It was really well worked, but nothing really special or nothing unique to separate it from any other Roderick Strong match or any other MJF match. And normally that would be pretty damning indictment of a match, but when you have wrestlers that are to the high capabilities and high capacities that these two are, even just a pretty standard match for them is a very, very good match. So I give this match 4 stars. So next up, we had our first of a few women's matches on the card. I can't remember exactly how many. Let me check my notes. Oh, that's blank. Nothing there. Oh, no, this was our only women's match on the card. Apologies. 9-match card, only 1 women's match on it. Insane that there was only 1 women's match on this card. But what a match to represent the division. Mercedes Mone versus Kris Statlander. An absolutely phenomenal match. And with so much going up against it, not only just being the one match on this pay-per-view, but also a awful story going into it. And I feel like a lot of the greatest women's matches in North American history are preceded by awful storylines. Like if you look at Bianca versus Charlotte at Mania, or Rhea versus Charlotte at Mania the next year, Lita versus Trish Stratus in like 2004, 2005 on Raw. Awful stories followed by amazing wrestlers going out and putting on an amazing match to save everything. And that's what you got here. And really a very necessary match for Mercedes Mone, because she has not been having a great year. Just a catalog of bad matches. Her match with Willow Nightingale at Double or Nothing excluded, of course. And she really needed not only a great match, but also a match where she really shined and doesn't look like she got carried to a great match. And that is what we see here. She had really great offense at the beginning, just going for meteoras and double knees throughout like the first 5 or 10 minutes of the match. That made up a lot of her offense. And it was awesome. I love matches where it's just someone trying to hit the same move over and over and over again in slightly different variations each time. It's just a unique way to structure a match. But also with that offense and with those flurries Mercedes got earlier, it made Kris look like an absolute hoss when she came back. And she looked awesome in this match. Kris Statlander pumps out great matches like they are nothing. And her matching her up with Mercedes is such a good piece of booking at this point, because Mercedes really needed a good match. Definitely her best match this year by far. And they did a really good job about tricking me into thinking Kris Statlander was going to win. And I really wanted her to win. And it seems like the crowd did too. And I didn't think she was going to win necessarily coming into this match, but through the body of the match, they were able to trick both me and the crowd into thinking it was Kris's night. And I'm not saying Mercedes was a bad choice of a winner, but I feel like the match might have been even a little bit better if Kris did win and send the fans home happy with the outcome. But it's still a fantastic match. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next up, we had Hangman Adam Page versus Jay White in what was not really a worthy sequel to their match at Wrestle Dream. This match was just a lot slower and didn't hold as much intrigue as their first outing. And this match focused a lot more on limb work. The first match definitely had it, but this match was more concentrated towards the beginning and middle rather than being spaced out over the whole match. And that's an okay thing to do, so long as you can build to those higher gears at the end of the match. But I feel it just never quite got there. And that's not to say the ending wasn't good. It was a bunch of fluid reversals ultimately into a Blade Runner with Jay White picking up the victory. And it was worked very, very well. It's just not as dynamic or interesting as it was the first match. I don't feel like the things they added to this match were enough to warrant its place. Like, I don't understand why this match had to happen if Jay White was going to beat Adam Page again. If Page was going to get his win back, I wouldn't like that as the story, but I would understand why you're doing a sequel match. But that's not what happened. I was so sure Hangman Page was going to win, because it doesn't make sense for this match to exist if he doesn't win, that my investment in the match was diminished, because I didn't want to see him win. So while Jay White winning at the end was a happy surprise, my investment in the match was lowered because I was so sure he wasn't going to win throughout it. And you can say that is a problem with me, but I really think that's a problem with the booking of this match and the reason why this match existed. And with a match like this, it's easier to focus more on the lowlights than the highlights, because it was a very, very good, well-worked, technically sound match. But I just don't think it needed to exist, especially on a 9-match pay-per-view card that's 4 hours long. I was sitting here watching this and going, why is this in front of me right now? So I dog on it a lot. It was very well worked. If you like watching these guys and you were excited for the sequel, you'll probably have liked this match. So I tried to rate it a little bit objectively. Even though I wasn't into the action, it was technically very good. So I gave it 4 stars. Next up, we had what was easily match of the night, Will Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher. And these guys had a 5-star match earlier this year on just some random episode of Dynamite. So going into this match, everyone expected it to be perfect. And anything less than 5 stars would have been an absolute disappointment. And boy, they did not disappoint. This match was absolutely incredible. In terms of what happened in the ring, I feel like a lot of it was similar to their match from earlier this year, but with so much more character work and so much more venom behind the moves. Like, these guys really put over how much they hated one another in the match. And when you have these sort of high-level matches, a lot of times they'll leave people saying, wow, those moves look really snug. It really looked like they were hitting each other for real. But in this match, they really were just hitting each other. Like, I don't have another explanation for how they pulled off some of the things that they did. Like, they hit a couple super kicks in the match where the person, when they got hit, just snapped their head back in a way that was so unnatural unless you're actually being kicked in the head. I don't understand how they sold it without actually being kicked. And just the way they dropped each other on their heads, there was no room for debate other than just like, yeah, they're trying to kill each other. That's what's happening in this match. And Ospreay just did an amazing job selling his arm and his shoulder. One of the best sell jobs I've seen all year. And that also really informed a lot of what I loved about the match. Every single aspect of the match was informed by Ospreay's injury. Every move he hit was slightly affected by it, and every move Fletcher hit on him was in some way attempting to target that. It was just a new, interesting dynamic to separate it from the first match. And there was a sequence towards the end of this match, right before Fletcher got the win, where it was just counter into counter, into power move, into a super kick that ended with Ospreay popping up and hitting an absolutely brutal hidden blade. And I wanted to highlight that section because it was like a 30-second encapsulation of why this match is great. Back and forth action, but not in a way that necessarily seems unrealistic. Absolutely pinpoint, brutal offense that really got the crowd off their feet. An amazing story throughout. And Kyle Fletcher's character work in this match was so good. I would say even better than his physical work and his move. It was just awesome. He was such a detestable prick in this match, and you just wanted to see Ospreay beat him. So then when Kyle ended up getting the win, you were seething almost that he was able to beat your guy, your favorite guy, Ospreay. And This was a really star-making performance, and Kyle has had a few star-making performances in his career, but this is like top of the mountain. He is absolutely a made man going forward. Is there anything wrong with this match? I couldn't find one thing. I could not think of one way to improve this match. 5 stars. Next up was the TNT title match, Jack Perry versus Daniel Garcia, and it opened with a very, very corny video package that totally gave away the ending of this match. Like, just from watching the opening package, everyone knew Daniel Garcia was going to win this match. And I feel like that reflects the match as a whole. Pretty good, but also very corny throughout. I would say solid would be the best word to describe the match. All the action was solid, but never really awesome or to the level of an AEW pay-per-view of old that you would expect. Both guys were really trying to come off as like uber tough guys in a way that was almost satirical or cartoonish in some ways. It couldn't really be taken seriously. Like at the end of the match, Jack Perry got hit with a big move and then leaned up against the ropes and did his scapegoat thing before being put into a sharpshooter and tapping out. Really goofy. And Daniel Garcia a lot was doing that like tough guy, spittle through the mouth, shaking his head whenever he got hit to amp himself up. Really, really goofy throughout. And there was one spot in the match where Garcia had to make the decision to hit Jack Perry with the title and win the match that way or not, which is just a dumb booking or a dumb agenting decision that's plagued a lot of AEW's top matches throughout the year. And yeah, it was just kind of goofy. But the finish had a really good outcome, and the crowd was very happy about it. I was very happy to see Daniel Garcia win. If Daniel Garcia didn't win, this match would be way lower in a rating than it actually was. But to leave the audience feeling so happy after what is a relatively fun but overly corny match, it's fine. Solid action throughout that sort of did lead to the audience being on the hook for the end. So I gave it 3 3/4 stars. And I'm just going to go right into the next match because I have similar thoughts on that one. Konosuke Takeshita versus Ricochet. Mileage will really vary on this match depending how invested you are in the two wrestlers. I love Takeshita. I think he's absolutely awesome. But I haven't seen enough of Ricochet in this match to really be impressed by him. And there wasn't really a story leading into this match for fans to be invested in. And the story they did end up telling was just a worse version of Ospreay versus Fletcher from earlier in the night, with one guy being brutally wounded and having his limb worked over by the more powerful, bigger, dominant heel, and having that affect his offense through the rest of the match. And it just didn't work as well. Fans weren't as invested in it, and while yes, they did technically hit a lot of moves, and a lot of those moves were very impressive, it was just very cold and very quiet and didn't seem like it had a lot of investment from the audience. And in terms of character work, I think Takeshita did a decent enough job portraying himself as the dominant heel in this match, but Ricochet as the come from behind babyface really was not great, because we've seen examples of that. We saw it with Ospreay, we saw it in the last match with Garcia. So two guys in the previous 2 matches had done it better. I think it's partially poor agenting. I don't know how to pronounce that word. That was not a bit. I just genuinely can't pronounce that. I feel like it was bad booking on the part of the agents, and I just couldn't really get invested in it. It had all the makings of a great match and like the outline of a great match without any of the heart or any of the heat that are required for a great match. So I gave it the exact same rating as the last match, 3 3/4 out of 5 stars. Agenting. Next up, we have Swerve Strickland versus Bobby Lashley, and this was pretty much a polar opposite to the last match. A great story supported by not the greatest action. I feel like this match, more than any other match on the card, was doing a really good job about pulling the fans into a Swerve Strickland comeback. And we've seen that a lot on this card, as I just talked about in the last entry, to diminishing effects. But they really did a good job in this match trying to get the crowd invested in a Swerve comeback. And I feel like their main goal in this match was to set up Bobby Lashley as the next top guy of the company. And I don't think they succeeded in that necessarily. Not to say Bobby looked bad, but I don't think he looked better coming out of this match than he did going into it. I think he is just the same, on the same level he was coming into it. And that is partially a failure of the match. I'm no more excited to see Bobby Lashley as a top guy going forward than I was before Full Gear. And I feel like that's because the match was sort of in this weird medium point where if you just wanted to have Bobby dominate Strickland and look like this unstoppable force, the match should have been 5 minutes shorter than it was. But if you really wanted to make Bobby seem like the dominant force and then have Swerve come back and have this great babyface comeback only to just be beat out in the end, it needed about another 5 minutes extra onto it. So it's in this weird middle ground where Bobby didn't look the best he could coming out of it, and neither did Swerve. So it didn't really succeed on either of those fronts. And in terms of the action, I felt it was all very good. Less so when Bobby was on top initially, because his power moves were sort of just a little bit generic, I feel. But when Swerve started to make the comebacks, I thought it was really, really cool. He had a spot where he ran up the steps and hit a Swerve stomp to Bobby through the announce table. That was just awesome. Really, really cool. So there were some things to like about this match in terms of action. I definitely did like this match more than the last two previous matches, but I feel like it sort of muddled up its story a little bit and didn't hit the ceiling that it could have hit. So in terms of action, it deserves higher than this, but its failure to capitalize on the story brought it down a little bit. 3 3/4 out of 5 stars. And now we're on to the world title match. The main event, Jon Moxley versus Orange Cassidy for the AEW World Championship. And before the first bell even rang, this match had a huge hurdle to cross. That being, it needed to make Orange Cassidy seem like someone who would be able to take the world title from Jon Moxley. Because going into this match, no one believably thought that Cassidy was going to be the guy to beat Jon Moxley so early into this new heel faction BCC story that they are telling. And as a result, there's potentially a very boring version of this match where Moxley does a lot of slow heel offensive work, works over Cassidy for a babyface fire-up spot at the end. It very easily could have faltered and not gone well, but I feel they did a very, very good job in this match about giving Cassidy enough hope spots, not just at the end, but sprinkled throughout the match, and Jon Moxley varying his offense enough throughout the match to keep fans on the hook the entire time. So I feel like they really had one of the best possible versions of this match that they could have. And it did such a good job about building investment towards Cassidy from the fans, even though they knew he wasn't going to win. It did such a good job about making you want him to win. And I'll skip ahead a little bit to the end here because there is legitimately one of the best near falls I've seen in AEW all year. When Cassidy hits Moxley with the briefcase and gets like the literal definition of a 2.999 kick out. Moxley shoots his shoulder up at the last possible millisecond, and my heart was in my mouth because I thought, oh my god, Orange Cassidy just won the AEW title. I was not expecting that at all. And I got worked over. I got worked over by the ending of this match, and I thought it was really, really great. In terms of what I didn't like in this match, A small criticism, I didn't like Moxley selling. I feel like a lot of times when Cassidy was giving him like punches or forearms to the head, he just didn't move or didn't sell them at all. And I don't know if that is a new character trait that Moxley is attempting to put forward in his new heel top champion role. But I hope not. I hope it was just a weird thing he did on this night and never does again. Also, I didn't like the interference spots at the end. I felt they were having a really, really, really awesome match before that, but those interference spots really dragged it down, and especially with Wheeler Yuta at the end. So the ending of the match is BCC comes out, and they are going to attack Orange Cassidy, but the conglomeration comes down, like, I don't know, Kyle O'Reilly, Rocky Romero was probably in there. He's always there for some reason. And they sort of fought off the BCC. But then Yuta came in, hit a Busaiku knee on Orange Cassidy, and that allowed Moxley to get the win. And I feel like it sort of just pulled the air out of the end of this match. I feel like I always prefer when matches are just two people in the middle of the ring having their own confined story. And I feel like this match would have been better if Moxley just beat Cassidy and then all this interference schmoz came at the end of it. I just felt like it detracted from the end a little bit. But what came before it was so good. And I haven't really talked about the character work yet, that aspect of the match, because I feel like that was fantastic. Moxley really looked like a badass. Not maybe badass isn't even the right word. He looked like a thug is what he looked like. Because when you say badass, you might think of Stone Cold Steve Austin. This guy who is a bad attitude but also an ass kicker, and the crowd loves him. The crowd does not love Jon Moxley. Really, they were booing him throughout the entire thing, and he did such a good job about just seeming like a prick the whole time in a way that you didn't want to cheer him. He was entertaining throughout, and he did such a good job about setting up Cassidy, but you just did not like him in the match, and that's the perfect tone for him. I feel like Cassidy also really had his selling shoes on tonight. Like, he did an absolutely amazing job in this match about putting Moxley up to that next level, making him look like the dominant heel champ. I thought he looked awesome as well. So both guys really looked awesome in the match, except for Moxley selling. But the ending did drag it down a little bit for me. So what would have been a 4.5 star match gets dropped down to a 4.25 star match. Still a very good match. Definitely worth your time to go check out. And those were my thoughts on every single match from AEW Full Gear 2024. Overall, a pay-per-view with some really high highlights, but a pretty mid pay-per-view overall. Most of the matches were good, but not great, with a few exceptions. The women's title match, Mercedes Mone versus Kris Statlander, was awesome. Will Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher, match of the year contender, and a really, really great main event. But other than that, not a lot on this card I'd recommend for you to go check out. But I could be completely wrong. If you think there is something else on this card worth seeing, let me know down in the comments below. If you think some of my takes were way off point, please let me know. I encourage discourse down in the comments below. But if you like this video, please consider subscribing. It does help a new channel like me to start growing. Please consider leaving a like, and go and check out some of my other videos. I have videos coming out soon for predictions for the next TNA pay-per-view, next WWE pay-per-view, and I'm going to be talking all about the Continental Classic pretty soon. So if you like that stuff, if any of that stuff sounds interesting to you, please stay tuned in the future. I have been Isaiah from Hot Tag Wrestling. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.